Hello, students. This is your life science teacher, Mr. Pierce, reporting to you from room 205. My sincerest apologies, I cannot be with you right now, as I am dealing with coaching responsibilities. Also, we are putting our microscope labs on a pause due to the need for me to get Eladia, which is an aquatic plant, which was unavailable from my typical supplier this past weekend. The plan is that I will acquire the plant within the next 24 hours. Hopefully, we will be able to continue the microscope lab. However, we are going to move on for the sake of time, and we are going to go into what we call the cell analogy project. To start off the cell analogy project, I'm going to ask you, and what you should probably write down in your bell work, and when I say probably, you should definitely write it down, Parker Duncan, is what is an analogy? You can pause the video while you write this down in your bell work. What is an analogy? All right, so leading off, what is an analogy? An analogy is a comparison between two things, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. If someone asks you, what is a dog? You may say, well, a dog is kind of like a wolf, but it's domesticated and it behaves domestically. That's what we would say is an analogy. You're taking two things that a person may be familiar with and trying to explain it more. And like if a person doesn't know what a wolf is, you may say a dog is like a cat, except it's usually bigger and has larger teeth. And instead of meowing, it barks. That is an analogy. You're taking something someone is familiar with and trying to compare it for clarification and explanation. So what we're doing with this information on analogies is you are going to compare a cell to something that you are very familiar with. Now, just pause and take a moment. I want you to think about things that you know really well. Perhaps it is as simple as a school, or perhaps it is a Target, or a Walmart, or your smartphone, or your MacBook, or McDonald's. Something that you have experienced in your life that you are very familiar with. A grocery store. Those are several examples. So I am going to compare a cell to a city because I see a lot of similarities between the organelles of a cell and the things that run a city. So, for my analogy, cells are comparatively like cells. Cells have several working organelles that perform tasks for the entire cell to continue living. Cities have several different businesses, people, and departments that allow the city to continue and prosper as a entity or an entity. So first off, the cell membrane. If you recall, the cell membrane is the barrier between the inside and the outside of the cell. We've also talked about things like it is semi-permeable, which means it allows some things in and out. But the biggest thing is that a cell membrane is is a barrier. And so if I'm comparing a cell to a city, the cell membrane is much like the city limits or the city boundary or perhaps a border. So, cell membrane is found in both the plant and animal cell. It is the outer side of the animal cell. It keeps the cytoplasm in and allows nutrients in, and it lets waste out. And it pretty much is what we determine as the boundary of a city. Here's a couple pictures I have. There's a picture showing you the cell membrane or the outside of the cell. This is an animal cell. And then I provided the picture tubicity limits. And that is showing you the city limit sign, which is where the city begins. Next up is cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the gel-like fluid that fills the space inside of the cell where other organelles are not. So if I were to compare cytoplasm to a city, in other words, if you think open spaces where other things are not, I would compare cytoplasm to open fields or parking lots. In a cell, the nucleus controls everything that happens. It tells the cell how to grow, how to reproduce, and how to function. In a city, city hall or town hall tell the city how to grow if it needs new businesses, how to function as a government entity, and how people should behave day to day. They control things like the police, the fire departments, the schools, city workers such as your garbage people, garbage truck drivers, sanitary, that sanitation department, that's the word I'm looking for. And all of those things that control everything that happens within the city, it all goes through City Hall. So just like City Hall controlling everything that happens in a city, a nucleus controls everything that happens inside of a cell. So my analogy is the nucleus is much like City Hall. And here I have a picture showing you the nucleus of a cell. And I'm also showing you a picture of City Hall. The nucleolus is like the mare. If you recall, the nucleolus is located inside of the nucleus. The nucleolus is also what produces ribosomes. And so as ribosomes are constructed in a nucleolus, the mare is what decides what businesses and other aspects of city can go into the city. So the mayor makes all the decisions. City Hall is what initiates it, but the mayor is what officially makes the final say. Ribosomes for a cell make proteins. Now, if you recall, proteins are what make the cell unique. The proteins that are made inside of your skin cells tell your skin cells to grow and behave like skin cells, which are different from your brain cells. The ribosomes make proteins in your brain cells that tell them to send signals among one another for your thought processes. So ribosomes are what makes cities very unique. I don't think so. I think so. I'm recording a video. Yeah, it's no big deal. Yep. Sorry, that was Miss Hughes interrupting. But anyway, ribosomes make proteins and make ribosomes make proteins which make the cells unique. Now, in cities, if you think about it, you've probably been to Shawnee, you've probably been to Lenexa, you've probably been to Olathe, you've probably been to Kansas City. All of these are very, very similar cities, but they are very different in how they are structured and how they function. Just like your cells, they're all animal cells that make up you, but your brain cells are slightly different from your skin cells. And so the proteins that are made inside of the cells make the cells slightly different from one another. Just like the stores and the businesses in the city make these cities just a little bit different from one another. So my analogy for ribosomes is stores and businesses, because these stores and businesses create products or things that are unique just to that area. And there's my picture showing you a downtown area with different businesses. The endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is a transportation system typically for proteins. And if you think about it, the endoplasmic reticulum will transport and help in the creation of proteins and transport those proteins to different parts of the cell where they need them. Also, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for the production of lipids. However, I'm going with the analogy of highways and roads, where roads within a city will transport things or allow transportation to happen by cars, because it is a roadway that allows things to move. Next up is the mitochondria. If you recall, mitochondria breaks down food particles to make energy in the form of ATP. Big emphasis on production of energy. So mitochondria I am comparing to a power plant. The power plant of a city is what makes energy or electricity for said city. Chloroplasts are only in plant cells, but chloroplasts are what trap sunlight or gather sunlight, and I am comparing them to solar panels. The Golgi complex is much like the post office or the UPS driver or the Amazon driver or the FedEx driver, whatever your preference is. But what they will do is they will package and deliver different items or different molecules throughout the cell. Typically, those molecules are not always proteins, but they will also get rid of wastes. They will package up different lipids if the cell membrane needs more lipids for its phospholipid bilayer. The Golgi complex, Golgi vesicles, however you want to identify it, will take those things and move them to its required location. Much like a post office worker or the mailman will deliver packages among the city. Lysosomes are like trash trucks. Lysosomes are your waste managers of a cell. So they will digest food particles, wastes, and any damaged parts of the cell, or other cells, such as your white blood cells, have very, very large modified lysosomes, which will actually find bacterial cells and destroy them. And get rid of them. And so your lysosomes are like the trash trucks. They get rid of unwanted things. A vacuole is much like a warehouse or perhaps a water tower. If you recall, a vacuole is a large storage system. We looked at underneath the microscope potato cells, and potatoes store a lot of starches, which are sugars, inside of the cells. And what they will do within the vacuole is it stores, or within a city, warehouses or water towers or garbage dumps will store a lot of things that are perhaps unwanted or perhaps need to be saved for later, like in water towers or warehouses. It's a little bit of a stretch. You don't see city walls very often, but a city wall is a barrier outside of a wall. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a mediocre presentation on a cell compared to a city. It is an analogy. What you need to do now is you are going to receive this paper and you are going to think to yourself, what is a cell like and compare it to something you are very familiar with. Could be a school, could be Walmart, could be Chipotle, could be your smartphone, could be your MacBook, could be anything that you can naturally think of and compare it to. And so what you are going to do is what you're going to do is you're going to come up with comparisons. So I am going to compare a cell to a car. And so with my analogies, I need to think, all right, the nucleus is what controls the cell. It contains the DNA or the information which allows it to grow and develop. So what in a car controls the car? Or perhaps what allows a car to grow and develop? Well, a car doesn't grow and develop. So I'm really going to think about and emphasize what controls a car. So I'm going to say steering wheel. I could have also said perhaps the driver. I could have also said the engine. But all of those would be applicable analogies that would make sense for a car because all of those kind of control a car in one way or another. But I'm going to stick with steering wheel as my analogy. And so my description would be a nucleus. The nucleus controls a cell much like a steering wheel controls where a car is going or traveling. And there's my analogy with a description. Next up, I may be thinking cells are like cars, and I need to think about mitochondria. Well, mitochondria break down food particles to make energy in the form of ATP. So I'm really going to think about, breaking down food. Well, cars don't break down food, but they do use gasoline for energy. If you were thinking about a gas car. If you're thinking about an electric car, maybe this is not the right analogy, but I'm going to stick with gas. So mitochondria will actually use gas to move for energy. So I'm going to say in a car, the mitochondria is much like the gas tank. So for my description, I'm going to say mitochondria make energy for the cell, much like the gas tank holds energy for the car to burn gas. Your task for the rest of class is to fill out this sheet. Now, I have started with the car. If you choose to compare a cell to a car, go for it. If that's something you are very familiar with, great. But I want you to try and think of different things that you could compare a cell to. As I've said before, you can compare a cell to a school. You can compare a cell to Target. You can compare a cell to McDonald's. You can compare a cell to a zoo. You can compare a cell to the U.S. government. There's an endless amount of analogies you could compare a cell to. I strongly recommend you pick something that you are familiar with and you compare a cell to that. I've had students in the past compare it to different games. A cell is like the Chiefs, where the nucleus is Andy Reid. In the energy, the mitochondria is Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce provides energy and excitement for the team. So, you are going to fill out this entire sheet. If you want to challenge yourself, You can add on at the bottom, below cytoplasm, you can add a cell wall and chloroplasts, which are only found in plant cells, but that is your discretion. If you want to stick with the 8 I have provided to you, you may stay with those 8. This has been Mr. Pierce explaining the Cell Analogies project. That is all I have for you. Goodbye.